Okay, so new episode of Serial. Like every month, I will look at photos I took the previous months or photos I've edited. And so let's start immediately with two pictures that actually I took last month, but I kind of forgot the card inside the camera. So I've kind of developed them this month. And that's with the Leica S007 medium format camera. Basically the most interesting camera for me by Leica. It's huge. The lenses are pretty huge. Those two photos definitely don't bring the qualities of this camera and lens up to. They're not very interesting. Let's say it like this. And that was with a Summicron 100mm f2.0 lens. But that's a volcano from Vestobrær, the western neighborhood of Reykjavik, and it's this volcano near Grindavik. On the Reykjanes Peninsula. And yeah, it's a bit of an overkill using that camera for that, and the results could have basically obtained by like any kind of camera. But anyways, I had this camera with me at that time. And actually, it took other pictures you probably saw last month of the same event. And that I kind of liked it because now those two pictures, it's with this super miniature camera, the Pentax QS1, which I've already talked about and showed you many times photographs coming out of it. And that's another day, very windy day with snow, sunny, and this camera, which is very small, that kind of has other, we'll see later, other ways of reacting to light in low light situations, in high light situations. When you have loads of light, it's great. The optical system is great. The camera is great. Autofocus is really nice for the age of the camera. And that's an example that's the Bay of Reykjavik and looking up north. When in low light, those two pictures are, you have this grain. I've already talked many times about it. A very strong grain that's at 12,800 ISO. And goes towards magenta and low lights. And the picture on the left, that's a small toy plush, which I kind of liked the photo. And I kind of like the grain of this camera, of this sensor. It's even worse with the older models of the Q series camera, where you're kind of stuck up to 6,400 and you basically have the same grain. But yeah, I kind of like to experiment in really slow shutter speeds, like you can see on the right. That's at the Radar Club in Reykjavik, trying to give a sensation of movement. And not sure the pictures are really good, but yeah, you get that grain and you get that really strong character to those pictures. And the picture here on the right, that's if you take a little bit more, if you're more attentive to using the internal image stabilization and, well, not try to expose too well, but maintain a sufficient speed, you can get some pretty decent shot. But then it's a discussion about should I use more modern camera phone or this camera? Anyways. Two more examples. I think that's with the camera, same equipment with a 0.1 lens, which is basically a 50mm f1.9. That's Kraft Gali, an electronic musician playing live at the Mengi. It's a small concert hall. It's just great concert. Just to show you the color characteristics and the grain of the QS1, quite different from a camera phone. And when you go to black and white, you actually get something, I think, really interesting with a really nice analog-looking grain. Not very analog, but still, it's not that coarse. And yeah, it can be a good option for low-light situations using this really tiny equipment. Going to something more modern in one way, it's the Leica SL2 modern camera body with a really old lens from what became Nippon Kogaku. Well, that's a Nikkor lens already, but it's a 85mm f2.0. It's supposed to be a portrait tele lens based on the Zeiss Sonar design, 10 blades of diaphragm and a 10-blade diaphragm. And I think it's this really old school look is interesting. Maybe the bokeh, we don't really see it here, but it's a little bit more coarse than I'm used to, more busy than I'm used to with those Zeiss Sonar designs that you could find in old Soviet lenses or Leica lenses. but nonetheless very interesting in low light. Those two next pictures, same equipment, except the colors weren't that interesting. That's a concert at Harpa. It's at the opera has many multi-function rooms, and they actually play different styles in those rooms, and that's rap, and that's Countess Malaise, great rap group from Reykjavik. Yeah, and going to black and white because the colors weren't that interesting. And I was in a really low light situation, even so the camera is pretty modern. I think it gives you some really interesting results. Again here, those two pictures, that's the same evening. They kind of, that's a upraising. It's named like this. It's a kind of a series of concerts with upcoming groups and Icelandic groups, and that's Mur, or Mur, I'm sorry, I don't pronounce it right. I think the characteristics of this lens, kind of old school, are quite interesting for that kind of concert photography. So I'm testing it a little bit. So I'll probably do more of those pictures with this same equipment. Now going to film. I had a Contax T, so film camera with the film inside, which I wasn't very sure what it was. It looked like a Kodak Gold, so I confirmed once I finished the film myself. Kodak Gold 200 ISO. Not really sure how old it is. Probably more than 20 years old, expired. And you definitely see the color distortion. The picture on the right, that's in Geneva, the Rhone River. On the left, I'm not really sure what I took, but the first few pictures weren't mine, but these are mine. And you definitely see the color going in weird ways. Two more photos with this same stock. Picture on the left, basically I messed up and went for a very long exposure, but I kind of liked the result. And on the right, that's a detail of the west neighborhood in Reykjavik. I'm not sure if, because the temperatures are really different. I mean, the actual physical temperatures where I was taking the pictures in Reykjavik was pretty cold, and in Geneva was pretty warm. So did that influence the color, or it's just the exposure I got? And well, anyways, I'm not. I probably never know, but maybe some of you know. Please comment if you do. But nonetheless, I thought it was interesting. Here we're going back to something more digital, but with an old camera, the Leica M8, one of my favorite cameras. So this old CCD Kodak sensor is basically as sensitive as some film stock. Doesn't really go higher, and then you get some really strong grain and weird color distortions. Very interesting in my opinion, but the M8 is a mixed bag. But here I used it that's at the Kex concert place. It's a bar linked to a hotel near the Reykjavik Bay. Really cool place. I used it with a Voigtlander 35mm f1.4 Nokton Classic 2. So it's got some coatings that are modern, but it's an old school lens construction, lens formula. Sorry, and I think it's a good match. It works pretty well. The sensor is not full frame, so you get the best part of the lens, and it's pretty open, so you compensate in some ways the lack of sensitivity of the sensor. And it's basically a 50mm here. And I thought interesting results. Same equipment here outside in Reykjavik in the cold. The M8 is really bad at managing the battery. When it gets cold, it sort of turns off really fast. But you can still take pictures. It's still fun to use. And I think it was a really interesting result. So I think I might experiment more with this couple camera and lens. Now going to a modern camera, but film camera. That's Alfie Tych camera. Recent, it's only a few months, maybe a little bit more than 1 year actually old. I'm testing it. It's definitely not my first roll, but here I was testing it with Ilfocolor 400 film, not to be confounded with the film that Harman does now, the Phoenix, which is a great film. You can go check the video I did about it. This is looks like a great film too, but not really sure who makes it. If you go on the net, some say it's Orvo, Wolfencolor, and C500. I don't know. But interesting results. Interesting results with this camera, which has those 4 small lenses on a turret that you can choose. Basically one pinhole, one with this sort of radial kind of diaphragm. and one simple plastic single lens, and one more high quality, I think it's a single glass lens, or a dual glass lens. Anyways, here it was the higher quality one, and I thought the results were kind of interesting. It's a focus-free camera for the 4 lenses, so you're basically doing f8, f11. There's 2 lenses, the single lens element lenses are f8, then you go to f11, and then you have a f128, I believe, with the pinhole. So definitely you need light, but then it's really nice to use. It's fun to use. The results are kind of different too. So yeah, it's a very compact camera. Here again, 2 pictures. This kind of weird exposure I have on the left picture, which I actually really like. It doesn't come from the camera. It comes from whatever I did with the roll of film, or it was pre-existing. That's not my first roll with this camera. I'm preparing a video about it. But I really like the results, and really fun to use. Some little quirks, but the camera overall is really great. I really highly recommend it if you want something kind of old school but modern. Yeah, go check it out. Here again, 2 photos with the same equipment, with this sort of blurring, and yeah, I don't know where it came from. I don't know. Anyways, it was also interesting to test this Ilfocolor film. I was kind of curious to see what it was. I'm kind of pleased with it. It doesn't have as much character as the Phoenix film from Harman, but it's not the same vibes. Anyways, going back to some digital, that's the M8 again with the Voigtlander 35mm lens. In a very diffuse light situation on the left, that's a Tjörnin, the small lake in the middle of Reykjavik, on a cloudy day. Just after the snow, it's basically ice under the snow. I like the small patches of color. Interesting combination, works well in highlights. Same thing on the right, but that's with the sun behind a sign. Which I think, I'm going to experiment more with this equipment, M8 plus the 35mm Voigtlander f1.4. I think it's a fun equipment to use together, fun pair. Here, going back to the Pentax QS1 with basically that's basically the 01 lens, but with more light. Some details of Reykjavik, which I thought were interesting. They go well in pair. When the light is good, you have really good results. Here in low lights, I kind of like the way you can have really motion artifacts, and I experiment a lot with it. And the camera is so small, it's great. That's in the center of Reykjavik, but that's near the Reykjavik airport. There's a domestic airport in the middle of the city. It's not the international airport, which is way down south. But you take pictures with this camera that you wouldn't take with any other other camera, because it's so tiny. And even here, where even the internal stabilization, it wasn't sufficient here, but you get some really interesting results in low lights, and in my opinion. So really fun equipment to use. And even so, those pictures, I kind of have some motion blur in it. There's a different vibe to it, and I kind of like that. So yeah, don't hesitate to post comments, ask questions or suggestions, and yeah, hopefully that was entertaining, and catch you next time.